Also, I mean, there is this strain of feedback that exists, no doubt you see it as well, which is, well, why doesn't Canberra just take over the mess of Victoria? Why doesn't the Prime Minister step in on borders in Western Australia? Why doesn't the Prime Minister overrule the Premier of Tasmania? Insert. It feels to me like there's a lot of Australians that need a civics lesson because we've either got too used to the concept of Prime Minister can do whatever the heck they want without actually understanding there is a limit to your powers, isn't there?
Of course there is. I mean, Prime Ministers are not emperors, they're Prime Ministers, and that's what our Constitution provides for. We have checks and balances in our systems of government. And states have responsibilities, federal government has responsibilities, and I understand that people, frankly, couldn't care less. Is it your job or is it their job? They just want the problem fixed. You guys sort it out. I get that. And when it's not sorted out, people get really cranky. And I get that too. And they'll direct that at me. They'll direct that at premiers. They'll direct it at the local mayor. They'll direct it on the dog on a bad afternoon on a Friday if they're particularly cranky. And I get that. I understand that. And so that's why it's important for me as a Prime Minister and the other premiers to, as much as possible, try and work together, because outside of the room, no one cares whether it's my job or their job. They just want the thing fixed. And when we take that attitude, we do get a lot more done. But it would, I've people write to me, they ring this office, they say, why can't you come in and do that? Well, that's not an option that's there, nor it is one that I think necessarily helps the problem at the end of the day. At the end of the day, there's a huge problem in Victoria with the pandemic, and we need to fix it. And it's going to get fixed a lot quicker if people are working together, not arguing.
Do we have to lock in a little more in terms of the way the states are working about how we step out of this? Because it feels like those rampant days, we were all very aware of this is changing here, but it doesn't seem like there's a formula. X number of cases, Y number of days equals this.
Well, it'd be nice if that was that simple too, by the way. One of the reasons I've been so enthusiastic in talking about what's happened in New South Wales is I think New South Wales is showing the way. And that is, there's a virus, it's going to come, there'll be outbreaks, but if you test, if you trace people using the COVID Safe app, all that's happening, well, you can keep your economy open and deal with outbreaks at the same time. When the Gladys and Dan Andrews and I talked about the Victorian-New South Wales border, I've got to say I don't think any of us were particularly keen on there being one, but it did necessitate it, regrettably. The three of us had always been those most in favour of trying to keep Australia as open as possible in terms of borders, but it needed to happen. And the thing is this, if you put a border in, if you put any restriction in, it's going to cost, it's going to hurt, there's going to be an impact. And I've got to tell you, one of the things that that really bristled me most, particularly over those months, was knowing that when you had to announce that things regrettably had to be shut down because the unknowns were so great. I mean, if you go back to the early part of the pandemic, Paul, no one knew it was going to happen. We were looking at images of people digging mass graves in New York, the big tents full of bodies in the UK, Spain, Italy, ventilators running in short supply, and we had to make sure that we could get the health system up to a level where it could cope with a pandemic of that scale running at full flight. Now, once we got on top of that, and we are on top of that element of it, then that's when we're saying, OK, let's open up now. Let's get moving again. Let's get the economy going again. And going towards the end, mid-June, and that we were on that plan, and that was great. And then, of course, the Victorian wave hit, and that's really knocked us back quite a way. But what I want us to do now is exactly, I think, what you're suggesting, is, OK, we've got to look past that, and how do we start opening up again? New South Wales has demonstrated you can deal with the virus coming and hitting you and keep everything open. I saw a quote by Alfred Deakin, one of our early Prime Ministers, and, you know, a father of the Federation, and he said Australia one and indivisible. Australia wasn't built to have borders. In fact, that was sort of the point, not to have them. And so we're not set up. So if you put a border in place, even if you have goodwill to try and resolve every one of these annoying, frustrating issues, it's not going to be perfect, and you're never going to get it perfect. That's why they created Australia. So I'd like to go back to plan A, which is Australia, where you don't have them. And the sooner we can get to that, the better, because it's costing people their livelihoods, it's costing people their jobs, and worse than that on occasions, the number of letters I've got, and I've been advocating, of course, that people getting access to medical treatment or accompanying loved ones, these are heartbreaking stories. Now, I'm not suggesting, you know, the officials who are dealing with this are heartless, but that is the consequence of when you put a border up. So it's not like, oh, we put the border up, everything's okay and everybody's protected. No, there are real costs to that too. And I think it's fair enough for Australians to know how those things have been balanced up. There's the risk of the spread, that's true, but there's also the great damage that is done to people's lives and livelihoods as well. And that's the assessment they want to go. So on the New South Wales-Victorian border, I would think that at the minute we believe that that risk of the transfer is at a level that is no longer necessary, I believe both premiers and I will move in a heartbeat to get rid of it.
Good.
Absolutely. Now, that was done as a cooperative arrangement. Others have made unilateral decisions on this, and that's a bit more difficult.